So
Yes.
when you started with Quant, what was the first thing that you did on the platform, and how did that help you?
I first went through the Quant Basics course. I wanted to do the Quant course like correctly and go through each step. So I did the Quant Basics, did the cementing, and then started to do each of the
Courses, yeah.
The courses. So I also had a little like notebook that I have around here. I don't know where it is, where I would like write the properties and have like a little summary of the courses. I know you get the summaries at the end, but I found it helpful to have my little notebook where I could go back and see like, okay, what was this property? How can I apply it to an exercise?
So what would you write down? Tell me.
So anything that like I wouldn't have it as fresh. So maybe for, I don't know, for the cycles for the numbers, when you would elevate the number, I would write those kind of things, or the properties for the different equations, like, or even or odd, like the tables, like where you had to multiply or divide, what I would get. So all of like those kind of things that I would have to remember, I would write them down.
Okay.
So
and
then,
yeah.
So then I could like go through them, and like during my last week of preparation, I did a lot of mocks, but I also studied from my little notebook.
Okay. Yeah, I think that'd be really nice to see that. So how often, other than the last week, how often did you revise from that notebook?
Not that much. I think it was when I had doubts. Like, so if I did some practice questions, I would go through a question, and then when I went through the solutions, I would see if I had those properties in my notebook.
Got it. Okay. So after the quant basics, then you started with what, number properties?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. So what were the key things that you refreshed or learned in number properties?
I don't remember exactly right now, but I would go through the course like one step at a time and use the diagnosis quiz with the PACE engine you have. So I would skip the lessons that I was strong in, and I would do all of the ones that I needed to grow on.
So yeah, you make use of the PACE engine. I can really see that, and so that definitely helped you. And one of the things that I really noticed was, as you really said, hey, you were rusty in many areas. I am actually, let me just share my screen. Let me see if I can share this. Yeah. So, yeah. So can you see your screen? This is your account here?
Yes.
Okay. So, so in this is, have you ever seen this view? This is, you usually probably saw this view.
I saw that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So we look at this journey view, which tells us how you're doing compared to others. And one of the things which is very unique about the quant course is that in the quant course, you have these things called learning activity. You can see process skill learning activity 1A. And here you can see you have a grade C in this case, which means you were in the bottom 50% of all eGMATers. So this is a comparative grade, but you did it so well that in the practice quiz, which is where you learn in learning activity, and then you apply that learning in the practice quiz, you have a grade A, where you got 100% here. And so this is incredible. Why? Because what it showed is how well you learned in this case, because only about 20% of people, 15 to 20% of people get 100% score in this. And I can tell you a lot of them actually do not, they get a score a lot higher than 45%. So even though you got a lower score, what you learned from the learning in this activity that replicated with the really high score over here, that is the same thing in the GMAT skills learning activity. You got a grade C again over here. And then you can really see you have a grade A in the practice quiz. So you definitely were very rusty, which is why the grade C here. But then that learning was, your quality of learning was so good that you actually were able to apply it right then and there. And that's the same thing that I'm looking at a bunch of other places over here. For example, here again, a grade B in the learning activity, and then a grade A in the practice quiz, where you got an 82% in this case. So incredible effort, while the focus is there for you, and I'm really happy to see that. So and I'm sure you felt that way, because I mean a Q90 is a perfect score, so that definitely is the case. So when you look at you've spent a lot of time in algebra as well, and you particularly did well in the algebra course. So was algebra an area of concern for you in your mocks?
Not really. I think a lot of the concepts I knew them, but like I didn't remember them. So as like I went through a course, I like picked it up really quickly, because like I feel like GMAT is not like, it doesn't like test on complicated stuff. It's just like the basics, and if you had them in the past, like getting that refresher and getting back on it, it's not as hard.
It's not rocket science at all. Absolutely not. But it definitely tests you on your ability to make good decisions, because it's not a test of math to that degree. It's a test of logic. So so that's where you have to be extremely careful, and while answering questions here, and this is the same thing that I'm seeing again with a bunch of other things in algebra. So when I look at your scores here, let me just share this again. You can see the same thing here, where you have a grade C in learning activity, and then you have a grade A in the following practice quiz. Very similar, grade B in learning activity, and a grade A in the following practice quiz. So that is incredible in this case. So and then you've, for this entire course, this has 7 learning levels from LL0 to LL6. And you have just one B, but otherwise you have an A or an A minus in each of the learning levels. So that combined puts you in the top 12-15% of all eGMAT students out there. And so
I think also like what you were showing from the learning activity to a practice activity, it was really helpful for me to go through solutions. Like even if I had got them right, like I would watch the video and see how they would solve it. So I think I really learned it a lot from the learning activities, and then I was able to apply it for the quizzes.
And that's, I think, for me, the hallmark of a diligent student. As you said, even if you got it right, you still saw the solution. That's someone who truly wants to learn. And a lot of people don't realize this, stuff such as taking notes, and just doing these little things while learning, they save you a ton of time later on, and they help you get the kind of Q90 that you have. In mocks, you were able to replicate that performance, because on the eGMAT mocks, you got an 83 as well in DI, the same score that you got on the actual exam. In the quant side, I can definitely see the timing struggle. So with regards to this, and because your highest score, I think, on eGMAT mocks was an 84 or an 85 in quant. And so how did you tackle the timing issue? So what decisions did you take on the actual exam that helped you overcome this timing issue? And how did that translate into success in the actual test?
For the actual exam, I try to have like a maximum time for each question. So I was like thinking that like if I was taking more than 4 minutes for a question, I had to like pick one and go along with it. And I think that happened mostly for the first question of the exam. It took me longer. I was like getting stressed because I knew I had that timing issue with quant. But once I got through that question, I was able to take the time that I needed for the next ones. And by the end, I think it was the first time I had like time to go back and check some of my quant questions.
Yeah, I think your quant score report, if we can share, that'll be really nice, because it has some really important learnings that are there.
Yeah, I can't share it. I'll share my screen.
Yeah. So
I go down.
yeah, if you go to the timing chart that you have. So yeah, I know this is not rendering properly, but the first question is where you took 6.7 minutes. And
Yes.
but then after that, every other question till question number what 14 is below the median time.
Yeah, 13.
Till 30, yeah, even including 13. For the next 12 questions, you were right below. You were really good with regards to timing. And even after that, you had a few questions that were where you took longer, but then you had a bunch of other questions where you did not take as long. And you changed three questions towards the end, so you had time.
I went through the questions for 3, but I didn't edit any of them. I stayed with my first answer.
Okay, good job. Considering
Yeah, I mostly went back to the first one
Hmm.
because it was the one I was like worrying about it. But I said, okay, just leave it as it is. This was my first choice. I'm not sure about any of the others. I won't change it.
Okay. Yeah, that's something which is good. And I think one of the other things which is there is, you know, everyone thinks that, hey, you need to take 2.5 minutes per question. It's never it's the 2.5 minutes is the average. On a per question basis, there'll be many questions where that you'll solve much more quickly. As you can see in Maria's chart here, and there'll be other questions which will take you longer. And that's the nature of questions. But in the end, it'll balance out because as someone who's gotten a Q90, you still had time left in the end to make sure that you go through certain questions. And so I think that's evidence that you will have enough time.
Yes.
So as long as you make good decisions during the test, you should be fine overall.
I also, one of my strategies was to know like the half time. I knew that like by the half of the time I wanted to be in the middle of the questions to like have that time at the end. I was thinking about that too.